speaker is known to millions of Americans as the greatest American miler of our time. He did most of his running during the 1930s and reached his greatest track performance when he ran a world record-breaking mile of 4 minutes, 4 4/10 seconds, a record which stood for more than a decade. At his retirement, he had run the mile under 4:10 more times than all the other runners combined. Many of Glenn's track records still stand unbroken. In 1933, he was chosen by 600 of the nation's top sports writers to receive the Sullivan Award as the Outstanding Athlete of the Year. He was captain of the American track team touring Europe and the Orient in 1933, and in 1936, his fellow athletes named him the most popular member of the U.S. Olympic team. Just before they tore down the old Madison Square Garden to build a new one, the sports writers of New York took a poll to see who was the greatest athlete to ever appear there. And Glenn Cunningham was selected as the greatest athlete to ever appear in Madison Square Garden. Under the title, The Man of 8,000 Miracles, Reader's Digest carried a feature story telling of the 8,000 boys and girls from troubled homes that Glenn and his family had taken under their roof, some for days, others weeks, and some for years. He has spent his time, his money, and his energy for the past 25 years in his dedicated effort to help the troubled youth of America. Glenn has been an inspiration to millions of people. Dedication, courage, faith, love. These words are synonymous with the name Glenn Cunningham. We proudly present to you now one of the greatest athletes and humanitarians that the world has ever known. Take your marks. Set.
Thank you, sir. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. At the age of 7, while attending a little one-room country school in southwestern Kansas, my 13-year-old brother and I were burned in a gasoline explosion. My brother burned so severely he lived just 9 days after that fire. I was burned about the legs, faced the possibility of having my legs amputated, was told at least I would never walk again. I could be an invalid today. I didn't choose to be. I wanted to walk. And even though I was told that I would never walk, I learned to walk. Later, I wanted to run, and eventually did a little running. In fact, I ran for about 15 years. My running took me all over the world through 2 Olympic Games, and was ready for the 3rd when it was called off because of the war, World War II. Shortly after I had recovered from my injuries, my parents moved off the farm to the little town of Elkhart, Kansas, way out in the sticks in southwestern Kansas. Well, not really in the sticks. They don't even have sticks out that way. But I found it the custom of the students there at the school, they would all walk downtown during the noon hour and do a little window shopping. I still enjoy doing that window shopping occasionally with my wife, especially after the stores are closed. This particular noonday, I'd walked downtown, was looking through the store windows, came to a big plate glass window there with a group of medals and trophies displayed to be given for a track meet to be held on the weekend. Among these medals and trophies, I noticed one little medal, only the size of a 50-cent piece, but it shone like gold. And I decided I wanted that beautiful, shiny little medal. Each medal, each trophy had a little card stating for which event is to be given. And this beautiful little shiny medal had a card stating it would be given for the Class A mile. They had a medal for the Class B mile. I was not interested in that. It did not appeal to me. But as I stood there admiring this medal, I made up my mind I was going out to the track, run the mile, and get the medal. It didn't even occur to me there would be other boys in that race who might run faster than I could. When I arrived at the track, I did find there was an obstacle I had to overcome before I could even qualify for this event. You had to weigh 70 pounds or more to get into the Class A mile. Fortunately for me, it was early in the spring. I still had on my heavy winter underwear. a pair of overalls, a woolen sweater, 2 pair of socks, and a pair of heavy basketball shoes. As I stepped on the scale, I checked in a light 71 pounds, and I was qualified. Then, for the first time, I did recognize the fact that there were other boys in this race, boys who might run faster than I, all high school boys. They towered up into the clouds. I'll never forget what I felt, what I thought, as I looked up at these giants. Naturally, I chose the largest one there to look up to, and at that time, I thought he was at least 15 feet tall. I started bringing my eyes down, seeing his big, long legs, and my heart just wilted. I thought, how in the world can I ever match strides with that fellow? His legs were just about as long as I was tall. And I wasn't satisfied with just seeing his big, long legs. I continued bringing my eyes down, noticing his feet. I noticed he was wearing a pair of shoes that had nails sticking out of the bottom of them. And when I saw those nails sticking out of his shoes, it gave me a lot of encouragement. And I thought to myself, brother, I've got you now. I thought every time you take a step, you're going to be fastened to the ground, and I'll just scoot along on top in these basketball shoes. The officials finally called for the race. We lined up across the track. The starter fired the gun, and we started running. This great giant jumped right out into the lead. He was eating up the ground with those big, long legs of his. And the other boys were hot on his heels. I was struggling along behind him, 5 steps to their 1, losing ground every step. But fortunately for me, this giant lasted about a quarter of a mile and dropped off on the inside of the track. He was out. Well, I knew why he was out. I'd seen him walking around town smoking cigarettes. And I'd learned this little jingle which said, cigarette-smoking boys are like wormy apples. They fall before harvest. He had fallen before he harvested that beautiful, shiny little medal, for which I was very thankful. I kept struggling along, finally caught up with the 2 boys in the lead, and they were running along there, shoulder to shoulder, side by side. As I moved up behind them, I knew absolutely nothing about the rules of running. I didn't know you were supposed to pass on the outside. You're supposed to be 2 strides ahead before you cut in. The only thing I did know was that the shortest distance around that track was the closest, which happened to be right in between them. And as I slipped underneath the elbows, the boy on the outside noticed me first, looked down. He said, "It's a pretty fast clip, you, isn't it, bub?" Well, my father had told my brothers and me out there on the ranch, he said, when you run, don't talk. Because if you talk, it'll break your rhythm and it'll make you tired. I remembered that and wanted to keep him talking, so I said, huh? Well, it took no energy to say that, and he repeated his statement. He said, "It's a pretty fast clip for you, isn't it, bub?" And again, I said, huh? Well, after repeating that several times, he gave up, thinking I were both deaf and dumb. I got to thinking, every time we take a step, we're getting closer to the finish. Now, I'd better move out of these boys with the big, long legs who'll be sprinting out past me. And as I pulled away, one of the boys said to the other, "Well, he'll be back in a little while." But you know, the first thing I knew, here was a string across the track, which was going to hit me right across the eyes. Never having been to a track meet, I didn't know what that string was for. I knew I didn't want the string in my eyes, so when it came to it, I just ducked underneath it. Someone came running up all excited, grabbed me by the shoulder, said, "Glenn, you have to break that string in order to win the race." So I jogged back up, reached up and grabbed the string and broke it. It's the easiest race I ever won in my life. But the race over, the medal won. I was far more concerned about getting home than I was in picking up that beautiful, shiny little medal. My parents were both bitterly opposed to all kinds of athletics. In fact, my father had told my brothers and me, he said, "Now, if you boys aren't getting enough exercise, you just get home here. I'll find plenty for you to do." And my father was one of these old-fashioned individuals who had a very striking way of impressing his demands on us boys. Well, I dashed home thinking I'd pick the medal up Monday morning when I went to school. But when I arrived at school and inquired about the medal, no one knew what had happened to it. And to this day, I have been unable to find out what happened to that beautiful, shiny little medal that I had my heart so set upon getting. Since then, I've traveled around the world, won all kinds of medals and trophies. Statues that stand up so high, sterling silver loving cups, diamond-studded medals, 18-karat gold, watches by the dozens. Some of those medals and trophies are worth more than $500. But I'm sure that none of them have meant as much to me as that one little shiny medal would have meant had I gotten my hands on it as a little 4th grader. But I learned a lesson, and a very valuable lesson. I learned that all that glitters isn't gold. And I think what a shame that more people can't learn that lesson in their childhood, in their youth. I still get letters from boys and girls from all over the world. I got perhaps 50 letters from a school here just last week. And the kids all say, "What does it take to be a champion?" What does it take to be a champion? It's so simple to be a champion in any field of endeavor that so many people just overlook these simple little basic things that make the champion. It takes a lot of hard work. It takes some sacrificing. You have to live up to the training rules, certain rules you have to follow. You know, they say in order to be a great athlete, in order to stay on top, it has to be early to bed and early to rise. You have to give up something in order to achieve something better. And if you don't have to give up something in order to achieve your goal, then you haven't set your goal high enough. I have traveled around the world and competed against some of the greatest athletes who have ever lived. I have known many of the other great world's champions. But I have yet to find one individual who can carouse around, use tobacco, use alcohol, use drugs or narcotics of any kind, and stay at the top. It just isn't done. I've known some of the greatest coaches. You know, at the University of Kansas, it was my good fortune to sit in classes under that grand old man who invented the game of basketball, Dr. James A. Naismith. Several years ago, I sent a telegram to a young man in California who was celebrating his 100th birthday. That grand old man of football, Amos Alonzo Stagg, who in his mid-90s was still coaching successful football teams. Now, he had been retired from one of the large universities because he was too old to coach, but he coached for another 30 years because he believed in himself. He produced winning teams. I received a handwritten note from Mr. Stagg thanking me for the telegram. He said, Glenn, now that I reached the century mark, he said, I find that I may never die. He said, all the statistics I find indicate that very few people die after they're 100. Very true. But of all the great coaches I have known, I have yet to find one of them recommend any of these negative things to any of their athletes. It is always on the positive side. Last but not least, you must want to win. I never won an event in my life because I was better than everybody else. I worked harder, I sacrificed more, I lived up to those training rules, and I wanted to win. Success doesn't come to the fastest or the strongest man, but success usually comes to the one who believes he can. And I never saw the guy that I couldn't whip at any game that I ever played. But I never won a race because I was better than the other fellas, but I wanted to win more than they did. And I never lost a race to the same fella twice in my years of competition. And people come around today and say, well, the fellas, the youngsters, they're taller, they're bigger, they're stronger, they're faster, they're just more capable. And I say it's a lot of nonsense. They have changed some basic mental attitudes, and that is all. I do not believe they are better. They are just changing attitudes and using what they have, because I think these records that they're establishing today could have been established 100 years ago if the people could have believed it could have been done. I know it could have happened. I would much rather, if I were coaching, have an athlete with less ability but a lot of desire than to have one with all the ability and with little desire. Yes, if you think you can, you can. If you think you dare not, you don't. If you'd like to win but think you can't, it's almost a cinch you won't, and that is so true. And I've told my own boys, I tell the other kids who come our way, a winner never quits, and a quitter never wins. A winner never quits, and a quitter never wins. The real difficulty with most of us is we never aim high enough. We set our goals so low. They're so easily attained. They aren't even a challenge. But remember, you never hit any higher than you aim. You're going to hit exactly where you aim, and no higher. So many of our young people mortgage their futures. Many adults mortgage their futures by handicapping themselves with narcotics and other vices, tobacco, alcohol, you name it, they do it. It robs them of their potential. They feel inferior. They become inferior because they think they are inferior. If they have the proper attitude about themselves, they believe in themselves. They don't need a crutch of any kind. They don't they don't need a cigarette. They don't need a drink. They don't need a pill. They don't need a needle. They don't need anything else. I've never felt any need for any of those things. I don't even need a cup of coffee in the morning when I get up to get me going. Because just the enthusiasm of getting into life in another day is all that is needed for anyone who can really count their blessings day by day and know the wonderful opportunities that are theirs. And it is truly wonderful just to get up every day, and instead of saying, good God, it's morning again, I have to get up and face this rat race again today, just wake up with a big broad smile and say, good morning, God, thank you for a night of rest and the a privilege of another day of life and a privilege of serving while I'm here. And if people would do that, they would just be full of enthusiasm. They wouldn't need any of these artificial stimulants to get them going. And that's been my philosophy from the time I was a child. It was my philosophy in athletics. They tell me that a bar of iron of a certain size and weight in its raw state is worth $5 on the market. But that bar of iron made into horseshoes attains a value of $10.50. Made into needles for sewing, it achieves a value of $3,235. But made into balance springs for watches, that same little bar of iron attains a value of $250,000, a cool $250,000. And the same is true of another material. You, whose value is determined by what you choose to make of yourself, and only you can make that choice. Champions, are they born or are they made? It all depends on this little computer up here in the head. What do you want? What do you want to do? How badly do you want it? Are you willing to pay the price? The world is yours if you're willing to pay the price and set your goals high and go after them. It's just as simple as that. You can do anything that you want to do if you want to do it badly enough. We never say can't at our place. There isn't such a thing as an impossibility. You do what you want to do, and you find excuses, rationalizations, and alibis for not doing the things that you don't want to do. And people just form these habits. You form a habit, then the habit forms you. It's as simple as that. I like to compare athletics to the game of life. I think they're very similar. The same things that make you successful in athletics apply to any other field of endeavor, will make you just as successful there. And I'd like to use, in closing, a statement made by Lord de Coubertin of France when they revived the modern Olympics way back in 1896. And this is still the official motto of the Olympians. Of course, we all play the game hard, play it clean, play it according to the rules. Play it so when that one great scorer comes to write against your name, he writes not that you won or lost, but how you played the game. And if you just go into it with your whole heart, body, and soul, you're bound to come out on top. You're bound to be the winner. They can't stop you. No one can except yourself.